So grateful to be here and very happy to discuss these incredibly important and hard to talk about topics. He has an incredible backbone and staggering moral fiber. Howie is totally committed, completely ethical, totally admirable. No pressure if you can hear this, but honestly, Howie's a hero to me.
John, you joined us before, and it was a pretty incredible kind of testimony you gave, and you just devoted your life to advocacy for child trafficking, and even 9/11 truth. Maybe you could explain to us, in the last decade, what do you think the most challenging parts of coming alive on some of these issues have been?
Probably the hardest thing, and it continues, is just realizing that pretty much everything that I was told and taught since I was in grade school is probably not true. And hello, good evening, and welcome to the Traffic Report. It's
hello.
Icy 20 degrees in the foothills of the Appalachians. Howie, is it a little chilly where you're at?
Yeah, but it's warming up. It's actually warming up. It's been cold. It's been cold the past couple of days, but it's been a tough winter so far.
We sorted up. We have a very special guest tonight. This is part 2 of Catherine, a Survivor Story, and the first episode has been the highest rated so far, I think, maybe in the history, over 100 views just in the past couple of days. So people are watching that. So welcome, Catherine.
Thank you.
How's the weather where you're at?
It's good. We're getting rain, and we need it. So hopefully we're getting snowpack in the mountains because we need that as well. We're behind, way behind.
Yeah.
So I'm Northern California. I'm almost to the Oregon border. So.
John, I just realized that we never gave out Catherine's Twitter handle. Catherine, would you give out your Twitter handle so anybody that is not following you?
Well, we tweeted it out, but
okay.
It's at.
Well, if there's anybody
_ 1958.
Duffy _ 1958.
Right.
Yeah. And I'll even tweet it out again right now, just so there's no mistake.
I like it. Twitter. I have been on there, honestly, from the very beginning. I've always had a Twitter account. And I can get on there in the middle of the night and always find someone to talk to. And if I am mad, I can get on there and go pick a fight with somebody if I want to.
And that was fascinating to me. Because we have our green room, which is it's not really green. It's just the three of us talking before the show. But what was fascinating last week was you and Howie were talking about, and I was just kind of listening to, you're like a Twitter pioneer, and that was so interesting to me, how you have grown up through that platform and used it as a tool to combat child trafficking, and raise awareness of child sexual abuse. So you want to talk a little bit about that before we
Sure. It's
Howie's got something he wants to talk about too.
Howard wants me to tell everybody that I learned the worst possible things you could do to anybody on Twitter from Leanne Rimes, and that's the truth. I mean,
the country singer and pseudo pop singer Leanne Rimes, yes.
Right.
And when I first, I don't want to interrupt you, but when we first started talking, she started telling me about the story about Leanne Rimes, and I was trying to follow it. I'm like, what are you talking about? And
you know what? They need to put Leanne Rimes and the people that work for her to do the dirty Twitter stuff. They need to put her on Podesta and Hillary She will break that code. She will have that frickin' manifest out in no time whatsoever.
Well, Howie's just a guy. I think you need to get a hold of her, Howie. What the hell?
Oh my goodness. Anyway. So, well, the thing is Twitter has changed tremendously. It used to be, you could tweet what you wanted to. You didn't get shadow banned or anything like that. And so it's evolved, and it's not nearly as much fun. And there's so much. I mean, look at your phones and look at all the pictures on your phone. All those nasty pictures that we've taken off of the, for memes and everything from the left. Look at how filthy they are. Do you ever think about that? I do. I do.
And I haven't been on Twitter a long time, but it just the stuff that we've run across on there is, and they're so full of shit. I mean, to try to tell. I mean, we were on here one day. I can't remember what we were doing, and I think it was Elle that tweeted it out, and it was a link to live child rape. That's what was going on. And I mean, we were like, well, I still can't even think about it too much. But it took us, I think, 3 hours to get that account banned. And at the same time this was going on, we were whatever we were tweeting out on the traffic report. Hello. No. That's not one of mine.
No.
But whatever we were tweeting out, we were getting 12-hour suspensions and all this crazy stuff. But it's
I've been suspended within minutes of calling my first suspension. I got suspended literally within minutes of calling a certain person a certain name. I didn't even know who she was. No, and literally, I remember one of her, whatever followers, said report it, and I was like, go ahead, report me, and it was like literally within minutes.
Boom.
Boom. I was like, what just happened? That was my very first suspension.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I don't want to digress too much because we wanted to talk about a couple things. I didn't mention this when we were talking earlier. John remembers a story of the ferries and the guys that dressed up as ferries and raped a boy in Pennsylvania. Catherine, did you hear that story?
No.
Yeah, it was a ferry party. It's a little complicated. There were 5 people involved, some from Pennsylvania, some from Virginia, and they were networking a little bit. And it happened in 2009, but they got charged last year. A reporter friend of mine, he works for a small paper in Pennsylvania. He contacted me and he said, "Did you hear the first guy went to trial? He got acquitted." Yeah. His name's Kenneth Fensky, and it's in the same county that the Grace Packard thing took place. And I'm like, there's 2 other people that are going to be charged. And there's not a lot of details on the trial. It was a very quick trial. It seemed to only take a day, but yeah, he got acquitted. So,
they dressed up like fairies.
Yeah.
No, not fairies. They're
fairies.
It's a fetish. It's this weird fetish where these freaks dress up as they're like big stuffed animals. I guess would be the best way to put it, right, Howie?
Oh,
yeah. I mean, like Fox. I think Fox is like a big one, and maybe rat. I don't know. They dress in like animal costumes.
Yeah.
Pandas.
I don't. I'm not,
it is a fetish.
So, and they have parties, but they're they're trying to say it's like a non-sexual. Anyway, the boy that was raped.
It's 12 o'clock in Virginia. Sorry about that.
That's funny.
I mean, he gave details that they made him dress up as like Tony the Tiger, and I mean it was at this guy's house, and raped there. But I mean, he got off. He got off. So that's just
wow.
There another story I tweeted out, and these are all on Pedogate News. There was a guy in Tennessee, and I'm gonna do some more. I'm gonna do some more on this because we've got information. I've got some information. His business and he's a they call it a constable in this little Tennessee town. Anyway, he raped.
It's like a sheriff / police officer.
He raped, I believe it was an 8-year-old girl, and he pled to a misdemeanor of indecent something or other, and the parents said that they didn't want to. The girl is now 12, and they put her. They want to put her through a trial. So he's on probation for 11 months, and he's not on the sex offender registry. And that was also tweeted out. We can get those articles. While
we're on that hashtag too, V has done some really great work with that hashtag. I'm just reading one right now that I had missed today, and I guess this is a former middle school football coach, Craig Wood, 49. The only happy part of this story is that he got the death penalty, but for the rape and murder of a 10-year-old child, and I hope people are putting this together too. That you've got all these child rapists out here, and now that they're seeing, that the atmosphere has changed and they're going to be going to jail, and even some of the, in the past. This is how the progression goes. They start raping kids, and then they figure out they're going to be jailed if the kids talk, and then they murder them. So I don't. It's like people, they don't seem to make that connection.
Right. But I'm more right now. I'm right, and we have plenty of convictions and stuff. But I mean, when I came across two people that just got off. I mean, the one guy in Tennessee. I mean, he did it. He just pled to a misdemeanor because they didn't want to put the girl through the trial. And something is just totally amiss there.
Which happens a lot. And that happened in, like, my own case with my daughter. We went to trial, and it was a hung jury, 10 guilty, 2 not. And the reason it was 2 not is because...
They know when you're on the phone. They just know.
John, I just DM'd that article to you if you want to.
Anyway, so I completely lost my train of thought.
Sorry about that. About the hung jury.
What's your dog's names, Catherine? So, what are your dog's names?
Oh my goodness. Oh, there's plenty. There's 6. Anyway, so it was a hung jury, and we received an email from one of the jurors saying that they believed strongly that the 2 who voted not guilty were pedophiles themselves. And this is out of 12, one jury. And when there was a recorded phone call and he admitted to doing what he did to my daughter, how hard was it to say guilty? Okay, so it was a hung jury. They do believe that the 2 guys who said not guilty were pedophiles themselves. Mm-hmm. And when it came to a second trial, my daughter came to me and she said, Mom, I cannot do this again. And I agreed with her. You have no idea the emotional toll that it takes on you. None. And anybody who is sue happy or litigation happy or any of those things, they are out of their flipping minds because it is just pressure like you cannot believe. And we were subjected to, the 2 jurors that we believe were pedophiles, one chased us around the stupid court, outside and inside. He followed us everywhere we went.
Yeah. Well, our justice system is so broken that
No, I want to throw this in there real quick. We did get a conviction on my daughter's behalf. We got a conviction, and he did jail time. It was only a year, but he did jail time.
A year.
And he did have to register. And I will say that we got a letter of apology posted in the newspaper, and that was after he was convicted. We didn't have to get that. And you know what? I'm going to say I'm thankful for that, because who gets that? No one.
No.
No one. And so his attorney went to the press and said, he wants to express his regret for the harm that he brought to the child and the family, blah, blah, blah. So, how sincere, I don't know. I don't care. It was a newspaper, and it was to my daughter.
Well, the good news there is I really, the atmosphere that we're talking about that has changed. I don't think the plea bargains are going away. The light sentences are going away. The avoiding the sex offender registry by plea bargaining, it's all going away. And I think it's already gone. So, moving forward, I think we're in better shape. But there's a lot more that needs to be done. And, I think when some of these bigger names start going to jail, that'll be a catalyst for this to happen, because when people are, enough people get aware of this, there have been people that they have changed their minds, and and I don't know what's in this memo, but something's going to happen with this memo. I'm getting ready to get rocked with this memo.
Look at you getting all current eventy.
Well, I just came off of Twitter, and I'm like, oh no, there's a memo. Oh no.
Yeah, release the memo is trending.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, I missed release the memo. What are we talking about?
There's some sort of memo that is damning to Obama, and has to...
only one.
No. What's his name? Matt Gaetz. He's a Republican. I think he's a Republican from California. He went on Fox News and said that there's a memo and he's seen it, and it's not be released right now. But if the American people saw it, they would be. I forget the words he used. I mean,
release the memo. I see it. It's number 2. Trending number 2. Wow.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Right.
Awesome. And not to change the subject, but Trish Negron, who's a friend of the show on Twitter and Facebook, is directing an individual who has what appears to be really credible information about a pedophile network that's being run out of the state of Florida with the knowledge of the Attorney General and possibly our Vice President. So she's directing him towards the show. So that would be an interesting guest to have. But
love them.
A lot of stuff going on. A lot of stuff.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about this case out of California about the child torture. But let's save it for Tuesday, because I mean we've already taken about 20 minutes. So I really want to get Catherine, get back on, her story, her life, what's happened to her, and and for people to understand like how just how amazingly strong she is, and how knowledgeable and what a she's a superstar in this. She's not as high profile as she once was, but she knows as much as anybody. So why don't we?
Well,
you want to?
Let me say this real quick. When we've talked about the different things with Twitter, I have used my Twitter account to bring a couple of teenagers that ran away home. We did bring them home, and
wow.
There have been other things that I've been able to use my Twitter account for, and my Twitter account is known as someone, if you need a tweet storm for a child, I can get you a tweet storm together for your child. And there was a case in Texas where you don't even know about this, Howard. The
I think I do.
The mother came to me, and the little girl was 4, and the father he'd already been to prison for rape, and he got custody of the little girl, a temporary custody. Well, you could clearly see where there was a lot of collusion, and probably the child was being the father was more than likely molesting the child. Anyway, to make a long story short, because of my contact with the mother, we were able to get the ombudsman of Texas to get involved, and they gave the mother a reversal in her CPS case, which gave her a huge leg up, but there was still a lot of problems, and the child was still in danger. But, just different things like that. And I'm nobody, honestly.
Well, but doing those things.
You're far from nobody.
But doing those things and putting pressure, whether it's on a court, law enforcement, whomever, making phone calls, even if it's not going to directly, influence the case, letting people know that they're being watched and people are paying attention. You're not just doing these things and it's just going to be buried on some back page, or it's never going to make the news or anything like that. I think when places start when the phone starts ringing, and they're like, you can do whatever you want when nobody's watching.
Right.
So, and I implore people all the time, if you can't show up somewhere, you can at least pick up the phone and make a quick phone call.
And I said a little bit about this last week, but I've found there's the survivors that have told their story on the show, and each one of you are some of the most impressive people that I've ever met. And I've been around. I'm old, and just it's when that group reaches some kind of critical mass. I mean, the earth is going to move. And you're all great communicators. You're all there's just this quality that's really indescribable, and I just think once these the networks are forming right now, and there's women that I've just talked to that's in they're the survivors group and the DCF group that we have on Facebook, and they're just when that gets organized, I mean, it's going to blow some doors down. I just can't imagine the power that's there, and so just keep doing what you're doing, and you're far from nothing. And
when I say that I'm nobody, I mean nobody. I'm not demeaning myself, but it puts us all on the same playing field, and we can all do something. And I tell people, you can go on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, go and encourage somebody, go and promote them, and it makes a difference. And if you're on your 10-minute break, go tweet, retweet, whatever. It makes a difference. It really does. And honestly, I have run onto things, and we'll talk about this at a different time, but Howard can tell you about what I know about the missing kids in Virginia. I've been watching that for 3 years because of Twitter.
Well,
we might bring you back. We might bring you back on Tuesday. We might bring you back on Tuesday. You can talk about that a little bit. Why don't we get into
part 3? I love it.
Why don't we pick up with your story? Because you never really got into.
We got up to where you were about 10 years old, I think, and you had moved to Oklahoma. Is that correct?
Well, no, I was in Oklahoma when I was 4. So, but where I left off basically was going into my stepfather's home and my mother marrying my stepfather.
Right.
And so the abuse for me started when I was 4, and that was gross sexual abuse, oral sex, anal sex, and, all the time. And that person had 3 daughters of his own that I know he molested. And I know that he molested everyone else in the house as well. And I had 3 siblings. I had a friend that we were 4. We went to the same babysitter. She had a sister. So, all these children, and this was by a man who was just, pretended to be a painter fisherman, and that he had so many child victims. And I don't even know how many other people that this woman babysat, because she was a babysitter. But so anyway, my mother met my stepfather, and they dated for a couple of years, and then they did marry. And at the time, we just had our businesses, and he wasn't in law enforcement. But then he did become a police officer, and then he became assistant police chief of the town that we lived in. And he was appointed by the chief at the time, and I can't think of his name at the moment, but so he was appointed assistant police chief, but he was a predator the whole time. He was a child molester. He was a sexual predator, The
police chief?
Well, no, my stepfather.
Oh, your stepfather.
Yes. The entire time, even before he was in law enforcement, he was still a predator. And he always had a lot of money, and he was always, seen in our small community of 7,000.
Was he married? Was he married before he met your mother?
A few times.
A few times.
I think my mother was his 4th wife, I think.
Oh, wow.
So, but there was, anyway.
Probably victims in all of those marriages, I would imagine.
Well, there was a mysterious car death with one of his wives, and so it just kind of goes from there. But so
there was a mysterious car death with one of his wives.
Yes.
Huh.
So you get away from this, serial monster Melvin at 10 years old, and you're basically
and then
out of the fire into the frying pan, or
Exactly. I moved up into the big leagues. That's how I feel about it. I moved up into the big leagues because my stepfather, he was a large man, and he was well established in our little town, and then some, and he was very politically connected. At one point, we campaigned for governor, who was David Boren. It was his first bid for governor. And we campaigned for state senator, who was, now his name is going to slip my mind, and he's like the most important one. Anyway, so we campaigned for senator, and we campaigned for representative, who was Jeff Johnston. And we campaigned with him. So what I'm seeing and what I lived was this man who was trying every day of my life to molest me, shake hands with politicians and everybody else in the entire state, because we went all over the state campaigning. And
once again, your mother wasn't picking up on any of this?
She didn't. But there did come a time that I told her about it, because that was the time that I got beat so badly. I had snuck out one night, and I got caught. And so he was going to whip me until I told him who I was with and where I was. well, I didn't want to get my friends in trouble. And so he beat me, and I literally had broken skin from my shoulders to my ankles. He beat me with his big police belt, and even my brother came to the door and he beat on the bedroom door, screaming at my stepfather, to stop and everything. My mother sat through this, by the way. And my brothers and my sisters, they were bawling, screaming, stop, stop. And he didn't stop. He got too tired. That's what happened. He got too tired. And
Catherine, I just gotta say, do you really believe your mom slept through that?
She sat through it.
Oh, sat through.
Sat through. I thought you said slept through. So
yeah. No, she sat through it.
Wow. So she witnessed this. She witnessed this.
We're talking about a different time in Americana, and I don't know what growing up in Oklahoma was like, but I would assume that the man had and also his position as assistant police chief, the man had control, and he was going to do what's right. I mean, today that I don't know how much that would fly.
Well, but, and regardless of the time, my grandparents in Scotland, talk about an old society that never would have flown. I mean, if you're opening skin on a child from head to toe, I don't care what era you're from. That is just beyond the pale of.
Oh, absolutely. John, I totally agree with you. I'm just saying, like, I'm sure that happened a lot. That's all I'm saying.
Not in any society, even back, as far that I was around, or my mother was around, and we're talking back into the the 1900s. That just wouldn't. Yeah, I'm sure it went on. But that wasn't accepted.
Well, Catherine can probably speak on it.
Well, John and I are the same age, so we're basically the same era. But you remember, we would get our asses beat, but not skin broken.
No.
Or you might get switched, and you might get, some skin broken from a switch. But you got switched a few times, and it was done. But no, he beat me. And I'm sure that it was probably all of the pent-up rage that he had, because every day he played a game with me. He would ground me. He would jack me up. So this was one thing that he would do.
And you were avoiding his sexual advances.
Oh my Lord. Every time that I entered a room, I had to be scared to death about where he was. And so it was always like a cat and mouse game. It was always a mental thing. And to stay in front of him, I had a praying aunt. I'm going to say that right there. I had a praying aunt. And I know if it weren't for her, he probably would have raped and killed me. He probably would have buried me somewhere because he had the ability. But anyway, and
was it the way he looked at you? Did he touch you? Was he just invade your space? Like, I'm just trying to like paint a picture of like what exactly it was like for you.
He always let me know that it was about sex. He always let me know that, and.
Verbally or?
Yeah.
Oh.
And it was, and it went from there to just everything. This is an instance. So we did dishes just like every other kid, and I was a teen at this time. I was probably 15 at this time. Mm-hmm. And I had a foster sister. And I had my younger sister. And I haven't said this yet, but he had children as well. He had 2 daughters and 2 sons. And there was a lot that went in with that as well. But I'm sure he molested his daughters. And so...
They lived with you?
No, most of the time they did not. In the summer,
Oh, okay.
most of the time they did.
Oh,
And
okay.
there was a lot of craziness that went along with that. I mean, a lot of craziness. And it was the 70s. So, but at this particular time, it was my turn to do dishes. And my stepfather, he did the cooking. My mother didn't cook. He did. And so I went in to do the dishes. And there were 2 rooms full of dishes. And it was my turn, and I was going to have to do all these. It was probably going to take me a couple of hours. Well, to a teenager, you walk in and you see that, you're crushed right off the gate because, for the love of God, 2 hours of dishes. But then it was always that mental game, and I knew that time he got me. You know, he got me that time, and so I just started crying, and I went in and I got my foster sister, and I said, "Do you see this? Do you not finally admit that he always plays games with me?" And she looked and she said, yeah, he does. I know he does. And then she helped me do the dishes. But that was just one of the things that he did. Another time I was taking a bath and I look up, and I have no idea how many times he watched me take a bath before this time, but there he is, you know, peering through the bathroom window and who knows what else. But I jumped up and went into my room and, you know, told my foster sister. And so she knew that happened. Well, there came a time when the beating thing happened. And so everybody in the entire family, all of the adults were mad at me. My grandmother, my mother's mother, my grandfather, my mother's father, he had passed by this time, but my grandmother, the Eastern Star Lady, she was still alive. Well, my mother and stepfather were going to go somewhere, and my grandmother had to come and babysit because I was so bad, I needed a babysitter. So my grandmother came to the house, and she was furious with me, and she said, "You're just trying to break up your mother and Bill's marriage." And I just kept my mouth shut. And then my grandmother said, "You can no longer use my name," because I was named after her. And I may be unusual, but my name really means something to me. And it meant something to me because it was from her and because I was named after her. And when she said she was taking my name from me, she meant it. She wasn't kidding. And that broke me. And after that, I said, if I wanted to destroy their marriage, I could have done it a long time ago. And she said, "Well, just what do you mean by that?" So then I told her about the bathroom incident and, you know, the other things that had happened. And so then my grandmother said, "Well, you're going to have to tell your mother when she gets home." And so then my mother's stepfather come home. And my stepfather, when he walked in the door, he could sense that something was up. And so he went down to the office because the office for our pipe yard was in the same location, but across a little road. It was completely, you know, separate and private from the house.
Mm-hmm.
And so he went down to the office, and my grandmother helped me tell my mother what happened. My mother flipped out. She believed me for, 10 minutes. And then she went down to the office to talk to my stepfather. And then my stepfather reminded her of how big of a liar that I was. And I lied about everything. And, lies. And then, it just went under the notation of another one of Catherine's lies.
Yeah, that was that.
The end.
Mm-hmm. Move on. And I'm sure life got even more difficult for you after that.
He never stopped until I left the state. And I mean, he went so far as to take my first child away from me. I'm telling you the truth.
And how did that come about?
He went to CPS because of his connections. He went to CPS and talked with them and had my child taken out of my custody. There was a court hearing, that I went to. And Senator Bill Dawson, that's who I was trying to think of earlier. It was Senator Bill Dawson. He actually represented me in this. But there were no accusations or anything else like that. CPS just came and got him.
This was a good old boy CPS organization working with somebody who's connected in the sheriff's department or the police chief.
And I'm gonna be honest. I'm gonna be honest about myself. At the time, I was partying. I was a young mother, and I was partying, but I wasn't like neglectful or anything like that. Well, when they took him, my conscience said, well, you freaking partied. But there wasn't anything on paperwork. Well, then years down the road, a lady from CPS went to my mother and said, oh, by the way, just so you know, Bill Snell, he came to our office and made us take that baby from your daughter.
And what was he, the assistant police chief at that time?
No, he wasn't. He'd been fired by that time. And okay, in the firing, he was he protested the firing, and they would reinstate him as a patrolman, but not as assistant police chief. So he did not take the position. So it was kind of like a wash. But
And he was fired for what reason?
Because one of the other officers said that he molested a lady that he had arrested. And the thing is wow. I was there when that supposedly happened. It did not happen. And this is how horrible that it was living in that town. We had a police chief that was corrupt. We had an assistant police chief that was corrupt. The police chief, he wasn't a sexual deviant that I heard of or knew of, but he had an agenda with drugs. He wanted to be one of the good old boys that, rid the town of drugs. He would plant drugs on people. He killed people. It was horrible. And then he ended up getting on drugs himself. But
so he got fired for something that didn't happen or actually did happen?
Did not happen. Not happen.
So the corrupt drug guys knew he was a deviant, so they could charge him. So it wasn't like a police officer standing up for what was right. You just had two corrupt factions warring within the police department.
One corrupt faction getting rid of the other corrupt faction because the other corrupt faction wouldn't play ball.
And taking, the one guy was a child molester, but he didn't like drugs, and the other guys were murderers and running drugs, but they didn't like child molesters. So,
right.
Wow.
They didn't care about the child molesting. They didn't care.
There's you, 19 years old, and your son, relying on these. This is who you rely on to protect and serve. My God.
I would venture. When was the last time? Have you ever been back to your hometown?
Yeah. Well, I was actually back there a few years ago when my mother passed. Like 4 or 5 years ago.
Oh, okay.
And I want to say this about what happened with my mother. My mother was, when we were older, she was just not present, not at all. But when we were younger, she was. And she wasn't neglectful or anything like that. It was the dynamic of the molestation and me not knowing how to tell and me being crazed and her not knowing any of the signs. And so these are signs. These are clues. If you have a child that's acting out, and like we have had a child come to our house, I know that he's being molested by his grandfather because his grandfather is a convicted child molester. He's been to prison, but we've called CPS, nothing. This child came to our house and he spread excrement all over the bathroom. I'm not talking about a little bit on the toilet like he missed or something. I'm talking about on the walls, on the vanity, on the toilet. he did that like 5 times, but we couldn't.
What town is this? What location is this? If you can say.
Where I live?
No, where this child is, and CPS.
No, it's where I live currently. I can tell you of at least 2 strong cases that nothing's being done about.
Wow. Well, and that's another reason I'm hoping and praying through that network.
Well, this is the thing, John. It's hard to crack these kids. I mean, I have gotten in these kids, I've been right in their face and just, be quiet and look them in the eye. Give them the opportunity to, just say the littlest thing, and they don't do it. Yeah.
And it's really not, it's like every story I hear is worse. And I mean, you've got it, just that reminds me of Neely, with her 2-year-old, 3-year-old daughter, that the entire state of Florida, the Department of Children and Families, tell her your kid's being abused, and then they give the kid back to the abuser. This was 9 years ago. I mean, wow.
Catherine, you were saying earlier, before the show, that because your stepfather didn't actually rape you, that it may not compare to some of the other stories of the actual rape. Can you just expound upon that and just let people know, no matter what the abuse is, on what level, I mean, it's all part of the same, it's all in the same basket.
Well, it is. And even though there wasn't like an actual assault where, there was penetration or anything, there was always the constant mind game and the constant pressure and being hyper alert.
He did sexually assault you because you're sitting on the guy's lap and he's got an erection. Sorry, that's sexual assault.
Well, yes. When I was younger, yes, and so that probably went on for a couple of years.
Yeah.
And I mean,
just because there wasn't penetration involved, that is a
well. By the time,
sexual assault.
Catherine, by the time you became a teenager, you probably didn't fancy you quite as much. So because he never actually got.
No.
Oh, okay.
Every day, Howard. Like I use the example of the dishes. Everything that he did, it would be some kind of mind game to play with me, Oh,
what about your younger sister?
Well, now you and I have talked about this, and I'm going to be graphic here because it was graphic, but I was very fearful for my foster sister and my younger sister, and so this one morning I got up early and I went into my mother and stepfather's bedroom, and they had their weapons on their sideboards of their bed. So there's a big headboard and there's posts on all 4 corners. And so at the top of their headboard, by each of their heads, they had their gun belts. And so I went in and I went right in my stepfather's face. He was asleep. And I woke him up. And I'm right there by his gun. And I told him, I didn't say anything else. I said, if you ever touch one of my sisters, I will kill you with your own fucking gun. And I left. And I think he knew I meant that because he didn't bother them. And my sister, she has told me as an adult that no, he did not. So he didn't. But that was one time.
Did something prompt you to do that, or?
Yeah.
Rage.
I was afraid.
No, I mean, I meant a specific thing, John.
I probably just a buildup, and
Okay.
there was an incident where he touched one of my friends. I think I told you about that. I had a handful of friends. We were out in the yard, and we were, 15, and we were doing gymnastics, and he came out to help us. Well, the one had huge boobs, and he tickled her. And after he left, she said, "He touched my boobs." And so that it might have been that prompted it, but no, I don't know.
It sounds like it did some good.
Did your mother stay married?
I did mean it. What?
Did your mother stay married to him?
She did until, I left the state at 19, and she divorced him not long after that. Yeah.
Did you ever talk to her about why she divorced him?
It was just because she hated him, not because of anything that had to do with me. But I will say this. When my sister was 18, she had something happen with her car, and he asked her to bring it over. He'd look at her car. So she did. And as he's got his head underneath the hood of her car, he says to her, there are young women who have brand new cars if they only do certain things. So my sister knew what he was talking about. And she just about closed his head in the hood of the car. And she, jumped in her car, ran stoplights and signs, to go home and tell my mother, that he had propositioned her. And so after that happened, my mother called him up and cussed him out really good for a long time. And so they called me and told me this. And I thought to myself, my mother felt really good because she cussed him out. Well, he deserved a whole lot more than a good cussing out. Mm. And I also thought, my sister she ran stop signs and stoplights because he propositioned her one time. And they never stopped to think that I lived like that. From the time I was 8 until, I married at not quite 17 to get out of the house. And then I had to leave the state to get away from him.
Catherine, as an outsider looking in on this, I imagine there had to be tremendous, trying to pick the word I'll use, but I would guess resentments between you and your mom and her, what she did or didn't do, during this period of time.
Know what? No, there wasn't, because I am Christian and I do believe in forgiveness and everything. But, I just think that my mom just was not aware, and so she wasn't that great of a mom. That's just the way that it was. It did come to the place where I couldn't take having a relationship with her any longer, but it didn't have anything to do with the past. It had to do with the present. And, I was always the black sheep or the redheaded stepchild. But, I will tell you this. I was an A-B student, and I never freaking skipped school. I had excellent attendance through it all.
Did she ever take responsibility for, like, allowing that beating or, any of that? Did she ever attempt to reconcile that with you?
Well, after I found out that my own daughter had been molested, I was talking to my mother, and my mother said, she asked me, she said, well, I wondered if that wasn't something that Bill Snell did to you. And I thought, okay, Mother, I told you when I was a teenager that yes, in fact, what he did do. But see, at that time, they looked at it differently. I mean, a peeping Tom as opposed to somebody who touched somebody,
Right.
But anyway,
you think she kind of, that was her attempt to try to let you know that maybe she wasn't there for you when you needed her? Do you think that would be fair to say?
No. 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 I see the deal breaker between my mother and myself, and I don't blame her. When I acted out so badly, it broke the relationship in the beginning. It was a broken relationship and never was mended. But whenever that happened with my own daughter, it was like she wasn't very concerned about the emotional health of my own daughter. And that wasn't going to fly with me at all. So I just had to, not have that.
I don't even remember. Did your mom know about your babysitter?
I don't know. I didn't.
Did you never told her? Or?
No.
Okay.
But my brother knew because I wrote a letter to that person who molested me, and I wanted my brother to take it to him.
Oh, wow.
But my brother, so I send the letter to my brother. This is the one who is the Mason, the Freemason, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
So I send it to him. He holds on to it until the man dies, and then he goes and sits at the man's grave and reads it to him.
What?
Wow.
That's what I mean when I say he's weird. I'm sorry, brother. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to, But
well, and my God, all this going on, the dynamics in the family have to be a challenge at best. I mean,
we were looked at. We were the assistant police chief of the town that we lived in. Every stinking town hall or city hall or anything, my stepfather was there.
And he had money.
Big money. And like I told Howard, we were at the governor's luncheon when he was, or is it the brunch? It's the governor's brunch, the champagne brunch. And
for inauguration.
Right.
Do you think in that crowd that he ran with, this is something that just went on and
no.
Everybody knew about it and
no.
It was accepted, or
no? David Boren and Jeff Johnston, they were good men. They had nothing to do. They were family men. They were good politicians. Jeff Johnston actually was killed in a car accident in Texas, and Bill Dawson developed brain cancer, and they were two strong, honest politicians. They are people you would want representing you, and they died tragically. But no, they were not. I do want to be very clear about that. But what I do want to emphasize is that here's my stepfather, who every bit of his life is directed at molesting me, but he's going and shaking hands with the most powerful people in the state without flinching. He can look these people in the eye.
Most sociopaths. Jinx. And we're just about to get caught by the music. Yeah. So part 3 on Tuesday.
Are you coming back, Catherine?
Sure.
All right.
Thank you.
We'll see everybody on Tuesday, part 3, Survivor Story. Catherine, thank you for listening and being here.